all. We're going to go ahead and get started. So we don't want to keep you long, and we want to be cognizant and respectful for everyone's time. So again, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the part 2 of the Courageous Conversations about Racism in 2020, brought to you by the Brown Girls Who Counsel. I'm Fran Morris, the founder of Brown Girls Who Counsel, as well as a school counselor here in Broward County, which is in South Florida. Tonight will be slightly different from our previous conversation. We have various individuals who will be sharing their stories and their experiences with racism from their expertise, be it school counseling, authors, or even as students. Before we begin, I would like you all to remain with your videos on mute, as well as your audio. Before we get started, there are a few check-in questions that we would like to survey. So if you could please answer the following questions in the chat. So we're gonna get to know you just a little bit. I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. Okay, I think it's gone, thank you. So in the chat, if you could share with us the state you're viewing from or county, is up to you. Your field of expertise or career, preferred gender identification if you choose to share it, and also to share on a scale from 1 to 5, how comfortable you would be in having this conversation, or that you are in having a conversation about social injustice and racism, 5 being the most comfortable. Again, we thank you for joining us again. To some, it's welcome back, and to some, it's welcome. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. And our goal is not to be remiss to share that we are focusing on changing the narrative. So as you guys are going ahead and filling in those questions, I can read them once more and give you some time to fill it in. Welcome to each of you for joining us. Okay, I see some people in Tampa, Florida, Broward. Welcome, welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Hello from Charlotte. Hi, Charlotte. Michelle, welcome back. Okay. We have a good variety of people on the call tonight. Mm-hmm. Thank you all for joining us. I see a lot of middle school tonight. We were just speaking about middle school. So we might have to call upon you to share some of your experiences. All right, without any further ado, you guys can continue to fill in those questions, answers to those questions. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it over to Anisha. Again, I am Fran Morris. This is your first time coming on our call, founder of Brown Girls Who Counsel and an elementary school counselor here in Broward County, which is in South Florida. Go ahead, Anisha.
Hello, everyone. Let me make sure my mic is not muted. I just got a message, my internet connection is unstable, so hopefully I don't cut out on you guys. But I just want to give you a glimpse of the agenda that we're going to go through today, and the introduction of our speakers by Malicia. This is Fran, our founder. I should have had that up while she was talking. So just a few reminders to mute your microphone. Please turn your cameras off. We are recording the call. Sorry, I'm also letting people in. Welcome again. My name is Anisha James. I am a school counselor here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I am also a co-owner of Something Social with the James Curls. It's an event that I have with my sister. Going to read you our mission. It is the mission of Brown Girls Who Counsel to support, uplift, inspire, and advocate for counselors and mental health service providers, especially those of color, in all entities in the field of mental health, and for the children, families, and communities we serve. Although Brown Girls Who Counsel was built for and in support of women of color who work in the field of counseling and mental health, it is the vision and purpose of Brown Girls Who Counsel to provide resourceful support and advocacy for all people without bias and prejudice. As mental health service providers, we have an ethical duty and responsibility to advocate for marginalized populations. Therefore, it is the Brown Girls Who Counsel's intent to follow this guideline and find a unified approach, to tackle the often challenging task of designing or planning systematic change. We have a few agreements for courageous conversations: to stay engaged, expect to experience some discomfort. The things that we're talking about are obviously not very comfortable for everyone, especially when you experience different opinions from your own. Expect and accept a lack of closure. We're not here with all of the answers, but we hope that in collaboration we will be able to find some sort of resources or something that will push us forward in working with our children or families or whoever it is that we're working with. Also, I wanted to announce that if you have requested to befriend us on Facebook or Instagram, well, specifically Facebook, there were a few questions on there for you to answer. If you can just answer those so we can let everybody in, and follow us on Instagram at Brown Girls Who Counsel. We will have a giveaway at the end. So we're going to randomly select a winner. We're going to randomly select a winner for a book giveaway. So as long as you're still here, you're in the running. All right, so now I'm going to introduce Melissa, who will introduce our speakers. She is the Executive Advisor of Media and Business for Brown Girls Who Counsel. She's a school counselor at an elementary school here in Broward County. She's the founder of the Excellence Project Incorporated and co-founder of Together. Sorry.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to introduce our panelists for the evening. Our first panelist tonight is going to be Lucy Dorless, and she is a school counselor here in Florida. She's also the Executive Advisor of Business and Research for Brown Girls Who Counsel. She's the owner of Bonjour from Lulu, as well as the founder of the Educational Wellness Consulting Services. She's also a board member for FSCA, the Florida School Counselor Association. Our next panelist for this evening is Jen Tiller. Jen is a school counselor in Indiana. She's also a health and wellness coach with online Wholehearted Living Accountability Group, where they help others to live a wholehearted life in order to be the best they can be. Our third panelist for this evening is Mr. Carlos Nunez. He is a school counselor here in Miami, Florida. He is the senior CAP counselor at his school, which just means he helps the seniors with their college admissions process. Our fourth panelist for this evening is Carlandria Lala Petty. She's a sophomore at the University of Notre Dame. Her major is in pre-professional studies and Spanish. She is a community builder filled with undeniable aspirations to reframe how people view health and fitness by changing the world through diversity and inclusion. Last but certainly not least, our final panelist of this evening is Mr. Darius Daughtry. He is an author as well as a poet. He recently has a book that was published. He has an organization that works with the Broward Center of Performing Arts as well as the Adrian Arts Center. His picture is not up, but you will meet him shortly, I promise. So now our first panelist for this evening, Miss Lucy Dorless.
Hi, everyone, and good evening. And Melissa, thank you for the introduction. I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Let me just pull up my notes. Anyone who knows me knows that I got to always have my notes along with me. Just so I could get started, one of the questions that Fran asked early on was, how comfortable are you having the conversation about race, racism, or social injustice? I answered that question at a 3, simply because I'm comfortable with having that discussion with people of color. I think for me, it's, I find it very comfortable because we can relate to it. We have that as a common ground. However, I struggle with having that conversation with white people or my white colleagues. I know in the past I've had a few experiences in my 15 years as an educator where I've heard educators or teachers who have said things that were kind of had like a racial undertone, and instead of addressing it at that moment, I typically kind of made, you know, I took mental notes saying, you know what, yeah, I'm gonna stay away from so-and-so. I know what your views are. So we all know what's going on right now. And for the past few months or, you know, lately, one of the things that I've been doing a lot is attending a lot of professional development webinars, because I know that when we return in the fall, I have a lot of work to do when I go back to work. And personally, one of the things that I struggled with or have struggled with in my years as an educator is that I typically, when I hear certain things from my colleagues that are racist, I typically say nothing. And, you know, up until now, I had to reflect and wonder why I was like that. I wanted to avoid it and just avoid those people altogether. More recently, we know last month George Floyd was murdered. I had a conversation with my 12-year-old son, and I asked him how he felt about it. And at first he didn't want to talk about it. He was just like, Mom, that's just so messed up. And when he was ready to talk about it, I asked him, how do you feel? And he said he's scared. And as a mother, you know, you want to protect your child as much as you can. And we started talking about how he feels about police officers. And one of the things we talked about were the SROs at his school. And I said, well, do you know who they are at your school? And he was like, I see them, but I avoid them as much as possible. And I said, why? And he said, I said, they're on campus to make sure you're safe. And he's like, well, I just don't trust them. And this is my 12-year-old son. And, you know, that really bothered me. And I, what do you say to your child? You know, I said, if you were ever in a situation where you were, you had an interaction with a police officer, what would you do? And he said, I'm just gonna simply put my hand up and listen to what they say. And he said, I won't even call you on my phone because I don't want them to mistake my phone as a weapon. I'm having these conversations with my 12-year-old. And of course, I could talk to my friends and family of color about these things, but I'm not comfortable doing so with my white colleagues. So with everything happening recently in the news, I had one colleague who's white who reached out to me and asked, how are you doing? And I said, I'm not okay. And she's like, I know I don't know what you're going through, but help me. What can I do? And I told her, well, it starts at home. What conversation? I said, this is the conversation I had with my 12-year-old. What conversation are you having with your 15-year-old son? I said, you know, she was looking to me for answers. And honestly, I was upset because I'm like, look, it's not my job. The books, the information is out there. It's not my job to educate you on racism and social injustice as if it's a new thing. This has been going on for years, generations. So by saying all of this, it made me kind of reflect as what is my role as a school counselor? And I know as school counselors, I know many of you guys are on this call right now. We know that, yeah, we go to school. One of the main things we learn is that as school counselors, we are in charge of creating a school counseling program that fosters the social, emotional, the academic and career development of our students. But I started to look at our ethical standards more to really understand what my role is when I go back and have to have these crucial conversations. Because a lot of times, no one wants to talk about race. And I have to admit it, I don't either. not with people, not with my white colleagues. And I know that I have to, in the position that I'm in right now as a school counselor, I have an ethical obligation to advocate for our marginalized populations. So I wanted to kind of talk about that as my role as a school counselor and what I plan on doing when I return to school in the fall. One of the things that when I attended a webinar about 2 weeks ago was the mention of this personal statement, a school counseling statement of purpose. And the purpose of this letter is to meet with your administrator, to talk to your administrator about, this is my purpose. This is the purpose of my counseling program here at school. Not only am I going to advocate for students and foster their social, emotional, academic, career developmental needs, I'm also here to stand up for, to be anti-racist, to speak on social injustice. So in that letter I started drafting, I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that my students, all students are entitled to have they're all entitled to have equity when it comes to education, and I play a role in that. So as part of my plan is to write that letter, to advocate for my, advocate for my students and make sure that I include the ethical standards. And one of the things I also thought of was, what happens if my principal isn't on board and doesn't support this? And I said, look, at the end of the day, someone once told me, as long as I'm doing right by children, go for it. And if it's for the children, I'm going to do it. I plan on reaching out to my state and local organizations if need be for support, but I think long are the days where I'm going to just ignore it and not say anything. I definitely know that I'm going to be deliberate when, if I hear something, if my coworker says something, I'm going to say something, not being afraid that I'm going to look like the angry Black woman because I'm going to say, hey, that's not cool. Because I've seen it in 15 years, I've heard a lot of things. One of the things I heard from a colleague a few years ago was like, you're not like those other Black people. My parents are from Haiti, and my coworker who was white said to me, you're not like those other Black people. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, you're not lazy, you're hardworking, and like, there's something different about you Black people from the Caribbean. I told her, well, I'm not from Haiti, I'm born in America. And she kept saying, no, but you're different. And I'm sure that some of you guys have probably heard things like this before. And in that moment, I didn't say anything. I was just shocked that she felt that way. And I know that a lot of educators feel that way. So I think as counselors, we need to definitely meet with administrators. What can we do and have trainings for our staff where we are addressing these things? I know sometimes schools are like, we don't have a problem here. We love all of our students, but do we? I mean, as a school counselor, I am a part of a lot of conversations. I see how students are placed in classes or who they're placed with, or how children of color, there's low expectations for them. Oh, he's not gonna do well with that teacher. I don't think that's a good fit. But I have made it my mission now to make sure I'm standing up and I'm going to say something, even if it makes me uncomfortable. So I leave it to say that we have some work to do, counselors, or those who are in the mental health field. When we return, we have to, we can't forget what's going on. This COVID, we have to talk about the students who have been affected by that. There's going to be grief counseling that's needed, but then we also need to talk about the conversation of racism. And I encourage counselors to make sure you're out there doing professional development as needed, because this is an important conversation to have. We can no longer ignore it. We have to put in place an action plan. And I strongly encourage that counselors, you start off with a statement of purpose. What is the purpose of my counseling program? And include the ethical, your ethical standards to show your administrator that this is my job. I have an ethical obligation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. As a reminder, if you do have a question addressed to a particular panelist or all the panelists, you can type it in the chat box and it will be answered in order once we get to the Q&A session. Our next panelist is Jen Tiller.
Good evening, everybody. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I am from South Bend, Indiana, and I'm the director of a school counseling program in a private school here in our area. And it was very interesting to me on how I was brought to this panel. I had been following Fran Morris on Instagram, and we had started talking a little bit. And she contacted me and said, you know, I feel it's on, I had asked her, how can I serve you? I'm a health coach. So I wanted to know how I could serve her. And she said, you know what, never have I been asked that before. How could I serve you? And so she got in contact with me and said, you know, there's something weighing on my heart, and it's about this serving. And I'm really feeling that I'm supposed to ask you, you know, to be on this panel and to talk. And so her and I and Lucy spoke, and so much more came out of that discussion that they even said, we would not know these things looking at you, Jen. We would not know how you were raised. We would not know your story and why you went into counseling. And that's kind of where I want to start, because nobody would know that I'm the youngest of 6, adopted by a Hispanic man, and raised until I was about 13, not knowing that was not my father. I'm blonde haired, I'm blue eyed. Something just didn't quite match there. But I never knew that. I never even thought of that. My older brothers and sisters, dark complected, dark eyes, dark skin, it all, you know. And here was this man who adopted me, God bless his soul, and raised me. But one of the things that we had talked about, what it was very interesting to me, was that he was very fluent in Spanish. If we would go out and talk with people and there would be Hispanic people there, whatever, he could, you know, strike up a conversation. And I knew no Spanish. Nothing was taught in the home. And my dad is 94 years old. At that time, when he was born and brought from Mexico City over with my grandma, his thing was to assimilate into our culture here, and to not distinguish himself as different, to not, you know, to try to be under the radar, to not stand out. Okay. So my three older siblings, one is named Ricardo Vargas. And he was the same way. He's about 18 years older than I am. He never wanted to be called Ricardo. He wanted to be called by his middle name, which was Lee, because he felt he never got respect from people when he was called Ricardo. I was naive at that time. I haven't learned these things until, you know, I've been older as an adult. But, you know, he was a businessman. He was trying to have his business be fruitful. And not until he was fruitful did he go back to Ricardo. And that was very interesting to me, reflecting back as an adult with him. So nobody would know that as my background. Another thing nobody would know is my mom and dad, the gentleman that did adopt me, they divorced when I was 3 years old. This man kept me in his life. He saw me every Sunday. I was not his child. He took me under his wing. I was able to see him every Sunday. My mom, unfortunately, had some mental health issues, and I lived with her. And one of which I believe that she was a racist. And looking back, we had talked about this. I talked about this with Fran. I had many girlfriends that were Black and or mixed. And it was always okay for me to go to their houses and do things, but it was not okay for them to come to my house. And I never understood that. I never understood those things. Once again, being naive. Once again, looking back now as an adult, just certain things that she would say and do, I felt were very racist now, looking back at that. God planted a seed in my heart to help people, to serve people. And initially I became a social worker, and I worked in medical social work under my undergrad. Stayed home with my family for 13 years, raised my children until my youngest was in kindergarten. Then I went back and got my school counseling degree, my graduate degree. And now, have been a director of this program for the last going on 9 years. I would say our school is predominantly Caucasian. We're 66% Caucasian. We are, the next statistic is that we are probably around 20% Hispanic, and then about, I would say 14% African American. And then we have Asian from most of our international students from South Korea and China. And so going in and working, I came from a public school. I started working in a private Catholic school, but I was raised in a public education. And coming in as a counselor, I think I've been naive all my life. I have to tell you, maybe it was a godsend that I was naive all my life in that aspect. But the one thing that, looking back now with everything going on, is that I treat everybody with love. I treat everybody with respect. I treat them how I want to be treated. And Calandria, Lala will tell you, she'll see me hugging kids in the hallways. She'll see me, being out there with everybody during passing periods, making eye contact with every single kid that I can touch. But what I did not honor Blackness. I did not honor students being Hispanic. I treat everybody the same, but in my heart, I didn't honor it. I don't honor it. I haven't honored it. And that's where I need to change. I really believe I need to change that. It was very interesting. Last week, I got a message on Facebook from one of my former students who is, Lala, it's Jomo. And so Jomo was one of my students that graduated a couple of years ago. And he went to go play soccer in the South. And he messaged me last week, and he said to me, Mrs. Tiller, I just have to say to you, you have impacted my life while I was at Marion. My son also played soccer with Jomo on the soccer team. He said, never ever did your husband treat me like crap. You were always yelling for my name out on that soccer field because you knew of my talent, you knew of my gifts. And he said, because of you and because of your school, the school, I believe you strengthened me to go down to the South, because the way he's being treated as a soccer player in travel games or whatever it is, in the college that he's at. That broke my heart. He's a person. All my students are people. I can't imagine. I can't imagine what my students go through. I can't imagine. And it breaks my heart because I believe they're my kids. They are my kids. And I would fight hell and high water for any one of those children. What I plan to do, and I've already started going back right now, is we're going to have a unity council. We're going to have a unity council in our school. I believe the one thing about my school is it's a private Catholic school. A lot of the things there is, I would say for the mission, that everybody needs to be team players and everybody needs, but when I advocate for people, sometimes I'm not considered a team player and I don't care anymore. I don't care anymore. We have put out surveys of our students and we've talked to students on how they feel they've been treated. Unfortunately, never has any of my students come to me and expressed if they've been treated in a way that is not acceptable by teachers or by other students. I would say we don't have either a Hispanic or a Black counselor on our team. We haven't had anybody, I would say, apply to us when we've had openings. And so that's the thing too, is we've not had anybody apply. And that's where I think granted, you don't get paid much in the private Catholic schools, I'll tell you that. They would get paid much more better in the public schools. But, if they're there for a mission and if they're there, I see the need. I see the need for our Hispanic kids who need, I would say, teachers in our school, of the culture. I know we need, but it's like they're not applying to us. And so I think it's something that we need to go out and seek and not wait, but seek. It's very interesting to me because I was listening to Lucy and talk, about her things that I started writing down, some of the things that she said, and especially about how she's going to go back and make that statement in regards to her school counseling program. Being that I am the director of the school counseling program, it will change. It will change on my statement in the philosophy of my department. I know that we have trainings that are coming up for our faculty and staff. I have really pushed for it to be somebody, not just, it's hard because I would say they want a deacon to do it and a Catholic deacon to do it. And I'm just like, I'm not sure that's the person that should be training. And I've said that. Granted, he's African American, he's Black and he's a deacon, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he should be our person for training. So I'm trying to advocate for those things right now. I'm advocating for a speaker to come and talk to our students. Notre Dame just had a phenomenal 5th-year football player that raised his voice, and Notre Dame is in my community, and raised his voice. And I said, we need that man at our school speaking. We need that man coming and reaching our students. Now I have to advocate, because if he's not Catholic, they might not take him. That just kills me. It just kills me. But I'll tell you, I need to advocate for the right people to get in here and to speak to our students and to speak and train our faculty and staff. It's important, it's needed. And I just want you to know that I'm blessed to be here I am blessed to have met Fran. I am blessed to have met Lucy. I support Brown Girls Who Counsel. I support everything that you are doing. I am with you. I stand with you and everything that you want. And I just wish everybody the best as we go forward in this next step of whatever the new normal is, whatever, is our next step, but there has to be a next step. There has to be a next step. So thank you. Thank you for having me. God bless.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. Next up, we have Mr. Carlos Nunez.
All right, thank you so much, Milicia, and thank you so much, everyone, for being here, for participating in this. I got to admit, I had this whole kind of thing planned out as to what I was going to say, but once I started hearing, the conversations we had before, and then also hearing, the previous two speakers, thinking about Fran, because also, again, just as Jennifer just mentioned, had it not been for Fran, I'm going to tell you that I would not have ever even thought about doing something like this, because, before I started my master's and I was with Fran in our cohort, I honestly, I've never considered myself, prejudicial against anybody or anything, but when I had Fran and my other classmates in that class, that was a huge eye-opener for me for 3 years, because I grew up in Miami, actually in Hialeah. I grew up, mostly surrounded by Hispanics. And so I didn't really, know much outside of, the Hispanic culture. And once I met Fran and my classmates, those 3 years were a lesson in diversity that it really, really opened my heart, opened my mind, and just gave me this, this unbelievable gift, really. Even though we had a diversity class, I learned more from my interactions with my classmates than I did in the other, 37 years before that. And, I came, again, going back to my beginnings. I was born in Miami. With the city where I lived in, it was Hialeah. And in Hialeah, back then in the late 70s, it was about 50% Hispanic and about 50% white Anglo. And honestly, I didn't really experience too much as far as, seeing the differences. And when you're a kid, you don't really see differences. I don't think children see those differences. They unfortunately are learned later on, and they're taught that. But I can remember one instance in particular where, we had a white neighbor who was a very nice man, very nice man in my family, very nice man to myself, my father. And I remember it was, and I'll never forget, I was maybe 9, 10 years old. And it was my first time actually seeing or feeling what, somebody who was racist, what that felt like. And the man had come home from work, and my dad and I were outside, and he asked him, hey, where are you coming from? How come you're in your work uniform? He was a supervisor for his job. How come you're working today? Don't you have the day off? And it was Martin Luther King Day. And he turned around and said a phrase that I'll never forget. He said, I don't take the day off for no N-word. And I didn't, again, 9 years old, that was the first time I'd ever heard that word. First time but I didn't know what it meant, but I knew that it was something bad just by the way he said it. And it concerned me, because he's always been a nice man to my family, but right after he left, I went and I asked my dad, I'm like, Dad, what does that mean? What did he say? I don't understand why he was so angry. And when my dad explained, as much as he could to a 9-year-old, what that was, and I said, man, I thought he's such a nice guy. I thought he liked everybody. And my dad kind of tried and, his best to give me sort of a little bit of an explanation about racism. And, and at that time, when I grew older, actually, was when my parents and my family began to explain to me about, their parents and when they came to this country, because they were, they all came from Cuba. and back in the early 60s. And back in the early 60s, you know, that the influx of Cubans was not like it was in the 80s. It was quite large, but it wasn't huge. And even then, when my grandparents, you know, went out to go try to rent homes, you know, unfortunately, outside on the front homes, the sign said, "No blacks, no Cubans, no Jews," and it was like something that was normal. It was, you know, that kind of discrimination was something that was all over the place in Miami back in the, you know, in the 60s. So hearing that and hearing about what transpired with them, because they had to flee their own home country because of communism and all that, and then seeing what they went through when they got to this country and the struggles, you know, again, I didn't experience that, but hearing it through them, I learned about it. And you know, I also realized that I don't want to be somebody who's like that, or who treats somebody like that. And again, you know, going back to what it is to, you know, to grow up in a place where you're pretty much surrounded by your same culture. When you leave and you go somewhere else to another state, you know, I never experienced myself that kind of prejudice until I went, you know, to another state, where I saw that, you know, pretty much everybody thought, but yeah, anybody Hispanic is Mexican. And I was called Mexican. And, oh yeah, you're Mexican. And I'm like, wow, if you guys only knew how many different Latin American countries and how many different nationalities there are of Hispanics, you'd stop calling everybody Mexican. But again, since they're not educated in, they don't know, you know, they're going to stereotype and just categorize everybody who's Hispanic looking as, you know, as Mexican. And, you know, and again, I think it also becomes something where you need to educate. And the more you educate people, and, you know, people fear what they don't know and what they don't understand. And once people begin to understand something, then they begin to see that it's not what they had as a stereotype, or see that the preconceived notions that they had were wrong. And though, you know, sometimes out of their own fear of them even accepting something like that, you know, sometimes is a barrier. But education and just, you know, just showing and being examples, because the best thing we can be as school counselors is examples for our students. You know, and just like Jennifer was saying, you know, when we see a teacher, or, you know, Lucy said the same thing, when we hear a comment, you know, and I think honestly that with everything that's going on, things are going to change. I really, really, truly believe that when we get back to, you know, being together, things are going to change. People aren't going to be afraid to speak up anymore. People aren't going to be afraid to correct someone who's doing something wrong. You know, hopefully in every aspect, even in the police department, everywhere, I really hope and I really, really feel that there's going to be a change. And I myself need to do, you know, a better job at that as well with my students, because I would love to have conversations with my students from every different background and talk to them and ask them how they feel, how, you know, what their you know, what their experiences have been. And something like what we're doing today, where we have that open dialogue, where we can share and express and not be afraid. Because again, Fran, I'm gonna be honest with you, I was nervous and very, you know, I was nervous about this because I didn't know. But again, had it not been for the conversations that we've had in class, had it not been for, you know, just the experience that we've had together and sharing all that we have in the last, you know, 5 years, 6 years, that has really, really made everything, you know, it's been a game changer for me. And I really thank Fran, and I thank all my classmates, and I thank everybody here for that. And again, you know, we are school counselors. We, you know, one of our domains is that systemic change. And, you know, one of the things that we got to do is systemic change. And this is a huge part and a huge issue right now that we need to spearhead in our schools. And if administration is resistant to it, then we got to, you know, we signed up to be advocates for our students. That's what we signed up for. And that's what we got to fight for every single day. And you know, that's absolutely what we need to do. You know, not just today, not just now when everything is fresh and the enthusiasm, but we need to constantly, do that every single day throughout our career. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. And thank you, Fran, very much for having me here.
Thank you so much. As a reminder, again, if you have a question for any of the panelists or a question you would just like all of them to answer, please don't forget to put it in the chat box. Next, we will have Miss Lala Petty.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, good. Hi, everyone. I am Carlandria Petty, or better known as Lala. I was born and raised in South Bend, Indiana. As mentioned before, I am a second year at the University of Notre Dame. I am also the Outreach Commissioner for Black Students Association at the university. To begin, I just want to give a huge thank you to Brown Girls Who Counsel for allowing me to use my voice and share a little bit of my story. Lastly, I want to use my voice to appreciate all of my ancestors who did not give up and for their courageous spirit and undeniable work ethic. Because of them, I live today. So let's dive in. Okay, so I can remember being a little girl with an expansive imagination, bound by an environment that kept me from being my full potential. As a little brown girl, I'm sure that many other brown girls can relate, but I was taught to present myself in an honorable way. I had to be well-mannered and focused. This kind of took away some of my innocence and prepared me for the everlasting work motto of being 10 times better than someone else just to receive the same acknowledgement. Something that connects with this is one of my favorite novels, Their Eyes Were Watching God, by Zora Neale Hurston. One of the characters, Nanny, tells the main character, Janie, that Black women are the mules of the earth, meaning that they are the lowest creatures. They are always used by others. However, Janie was not here for it, and she knew she had to use her own voice and mind. She knew she could be something great because she was a person too. But more importantly, she knew she could be the greatest in whatever she wanted to be because she was a Black woman. I am absolutely grateful that my senior teacher shared this novel with me. Moving forward, I would just like to share some of my experiences as being a brown girl with you all. I can remember being in the second grade when a girl in my class, who probably doesn't even remember this, asked obnoxiously, "Why do you have brown dots on your legs?" I was confused and a little embarrassed because she kind of said it loud, and I was pretty timid as a child. And because my legs never really crossed my mind as exotic or intriguing. So then she went to ask again and again and again, and then she even touched my leg. I threatened to tell the teacher so she'd stop. Every day after that, I began to stare at the skin on my legs and I began to compare myself to other children. Fast forward to high school, it was picture day for track. As we all came together to take our picture, it hit me that I was literally the only person of color on my team. As a photographer directed us, of course my placement was right smack in the middle. At the moment, I kind of laughed to myself and thought, wow, it's 2018 and this is still happening. However, I was still proud to be doing something that I loved, so I posted this track picture on my socials and some of the responses were hurtful. I bet she runs all the sprints, or how is she even comfortable with this? Another experience, it was family night at my high school, which happens to be a primarily white high school. I was talking to a younger sibling of one of my classmates, and then this beautiful baby girl asked pretty loud, "Why are you Black?" Honestly, my stomach hit the floor, almost like embarrassment. How can someone so small and innocent affect my entire well-being?
Let me see her. She's so
white. I thought to myself, I was like, oh my goodness, like, what am I supposed to say? At the time, I was 18, but the way she asked me made me want to cry. Almost like she was disgusted because of my skin color. I just gave her the best answer I could and said, because God made me this way. Of course, her mother tried to cover up for her and say that she was sorry, but that didn't console me. As you can probably note, high school was a challenge for me. I can remember creating a master plan my freshman year on how to change my high school for the better. The last stage of my plan was called Diversity and Inclusion. I like to share an excerpt that I wrote at the end of my high school experience. I quote, "Let's face it, I never thought I would attend a private Catholic high school filled with white faces. But then again, I never thought I would eat pineapples on my pizza, and now pineapples are my favorite topping. My first day of high school, I immediately mumbled, wow, I feel stranded. I barely see any Black people. I was in a foreign place looking for a way out or a way to fit in. I did not want to be the vegetables on my plate that many people dread, but I also didn't want to be the main dish. My transition into high school was abysmal, like when someone eats your leftovers, although the container clearly had your name imprinted on it. As days filled my high school journey, I found myself complaining, crying, and feeling alone because people at my school did not understand me, and quite frankly, I didn't give them a chance to. Everything always felt offensive, or everyone always had a question regarding my ethnicity or background. I just wanted my school to relate to all students. I cannot solely put the blame on people within my school. Like that of a chrysalis, I guarded and protected the color of my skin with a facade that restricted me from my full potential, and protected the color and a facade that kept me from peers and teachers at a distance in fear that they would title me different. A facade that hid the real me. Therefore, I had to decide, remain in a sheltered state that hindered my growth, or embrace these differences and soar. I decided the latter, not only for my academic and spiritual growth, but for the growth of cultural inclusion throughout my school and community. I planned to make my school overflow with the diversity it lacked, to care for the needs of all people, to encourage the gifts of all people, and not only accept different cultures, but to embrace and celebrate them. Moving on, motivational assemblies were not always my favorite. However, after listening to 3 years of motivational assemblies that promoted environmental and societal change, I concluded that the change in my school would not be seen until an individual chose to make that change happen. Transitioning into a butterfly, I selected myself to be that individual. In this effort, I ran for and became elected as student body president of my high school. With this title, I integrated and promoted cultural inclusion through the following theme: different gifts, same spirit, one body. That's 1 Corinthians 12. My theme aimed to provide a levitating atmosphere through the filming of uplifting videos that educated students on various cultures to celebrate a different culture each month, and to integrate those cultures by serving traditional foods in our cafeteria. Figuratively and literally, my school became a colorful rainbow, replacing the once dominant hues of Black and white. Being one of the few Black faces in a white crowd, I first felt at a disadvantage. I felt weighed down by the differences which once separated me from others. I was a chrysalis, sheltered and afraid. Applying those differences as my passion for change, I realized that I had to first spread my wings and take pride in not only my culture, but cultures globally. I had to transform my mindset in order to positively transform my school's societal structure. I opened my wings to become student body president and culturally redefine the community within my high school. And at the end, I put, imagine what I could do when I begin to fly, end quote. Even after I gave everything I had to my high school, at the end, I felt like I received a slap in the face. Throughout the school year, I received praise for trying to change the environment of my school. Some people were on board, but it felt like many people were trying to sink the ship. Because of my leadership position, I was called arrogant or obnoxious, attitudey, aggressive, and more. That only screamed one thing to me: the angry Black woman. I think what hurt me the most was that many people saw the difference I was trying to make, but were too cowardly to join the ride. Recently, I received an email stating an apology for not supporting the difference I was trying to make. Thankfully, I was offered to help my high school with training and workshops for staff within my high school regarding racial biases. Growing up, I realized that being a young woman in America is scary with all caps. We have to worry about sexual assault, discrimination in employment, occupational segregation, pay gap, and more. Women in America, in the United States, have made significant strides towards closing the gaps that have kept them from achieving equality with men. But now imagine being a woman of color living in America. It's all of that on top of your emotions of feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, and sickened. Plus, all of those inequality gaps are enlarged. Sometimes I feel like the past success that I've had is because I slipped through the cracks, and many other brown students may not be as fortunate as me. Today, I use my voice as my weapon to encourage other brown students with my focus being especially on women, to never be ashamed to use their voice. You are who you are, and you shouldn't be ashamed of it. You are the star, and you hold the power to make the world around you better. If you cannot financially help the Black Lives Matter movement, you can sign petitions for free. You can use your social media platforms to inform others, but most importantly, you can educate yourself. As I'm heading towards the end, I would like to share with you all a poem that I wrote indirectly to my white friends. I wrote this poem based on my feelings as being a brown child. This is who I am. I am me. Can't you see me? I am here, you are there. You don't understand, but life's not fair. We are raised differently because I just can't be me. I'm caged, you're free. That's the difference between you and me. Lastly, I would like to leave you all with a quote from Their Eyes Were Watching God. Ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. This quote establishes the purpose of a coming of age story. Every man's wish reveals that all people can have dreams, not just a certain group of people. Also, this phrase reveals a sense of unity. Everyone is trying to get to the end. Everyone is on life's journey of self-revelation, and they must lean on each other to accomplish this rigorous task. We need each other. People of color need our allies, and allies need people of color. This cycle of life cannot be done alone. I'm only one brown girl, but I hold the pain, love, and hope of all brown people. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. Last but not least, we will have Mr. Darius Daughtry.
I got dead Black boys in my pocket. I don't leave home without them. I got my ritual. I grab my bag, my keys, my ID, and 2 or 3 brown bodies that I buried betwixt the lint. They hold me down. They keep me weighted. They slow my step, a little less bounce in my bop. They cause me to stop, freeze. They squeeze my thighs, buckle my knees, and straighten my spine. More reliable than any card, credit, or debit. The dead get me right. They keep me quiet by screaming over me sometimes. In the summertime, you can smell them, see them, their futures rotting, see them spotting as blood drips down my legs. Sometimes they jingle like change, these dead boys, these dead Black boys make music like tambourine, like they're yet shells, casings dancing towards the ground that sound like you must not be listening, must not be looking, must have your ears plugged or bird box bandana over your eyes. How else could you not hear or see the cries? They sound a lot like your future's being choked out of you. They sound like niños at the border asking, ¿Dónde está mi mamá, papá? They sound a lot like racist rants on Charlottesville streets, like Trayvon on that Sanford street, like George on Minneapolis streets. They sound a lot like no justice, no peace, but I hear a lot of kumbaya where privatized prisons still profit off pigment. The adage goes, closed mouth don't get fed, but we scream instead, but our plates are still empty and our cups run over with lead. Maybe we're not screaming after all, and the sound is just all in our heads. That's why you crack them open, hoping that the blood drops at a steady pace. Something rhythmic and palatable for you to tap your toe, nod your head, maybe whistle a sweet little ditty, take that, take that. You don't want us around, want us to stay back, stay back. The only time you hear us is when we speak murder or Maybach, but we are speaking revolution. It's that take back, that pay black, payback, that stay black, stay black. Holla if you hear me. Greetings, everybody. My name is Darius Daughtry. I am an artist and an activist and educator standing in the tradition of Black artists like James Baldwin and Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston, as Lala mentioned, and Nikki Giovanni and Claude McKay and August Wilson and Nina Simone and Audre Lorde and Marvin Gaye. And, you know, this is super important, and I'm so glad I'm here with you all. And this is how I do my thing. I connect via words. I have an organization that is all about art education and impacting communities through the arts. And I myself am a poet, playwright, and director. And so I was going to kind of give a talk, but I'm just going to share a couple more poems And we'll leave it at that. So that was that first poem. And I'm going to read a poem here from my book, but I think it's super relevant for all of you who work with young people. It's called Daquan, and Daquan is my younger cousin. So this is the poem here. Daquan is 11. Daquan is all knee scrapes and spit bubbles. Daquan is a good boy. He straight A's and pleases and thank yous. Daquan is growth spurts and math tests and Sunday school naps, but yes, he can recite the 23rd Psalm. Daquan is calm, often. Daquan tries to be rough, but softens up when grandma calls. He's grandma's baby. Daquan is adolescent, lazy. Daquan is video game controller controlling and sore losing. He is, boy, I ain't gonna tell you again to take out that trash. Daquan is sloppy, yet somewhat effective crossover and all jump in his jump shot. Daquan is 8 push-ups then flop. Daquan is, that's my girlfriend, which means he gives her his cookie at lunch. Daquan is a good boy. He straight A's and pleases and thank yous. Daquan is black. He is real black. He black like me. He can't be confused with anything but black. I see myself in him. I was Daquan, named similar and handcuffed at 5 for not knowing I needed to run. Daquan is all run, all race, all sun sweat on his face, all love, all listen. When I speak, he listens. So how do I tell Daquan that he has been born into a skin that attracts taser beams, baton blows, and bullets? How do I tell him that before he feels hair on his upper lip, he's liable to feel cuffs upon his wrist? I don't have any children, but I always wonder how I would breathe the news of no Santa to them, how I would confess to being both Saint Nick and the Tooth Fairy, that I am not the world's strongest man or smartest man. Confessions make innocence disappear and harsh realities taste a lot like fear. Scary truths never want to be confronted. Daquan is a good boy, and he listens. I've instilled in him that hard work plus dedication equals success. How do I admit to being a liar? Having painted his brain with bright, vivid colors that don't exist for him, don't exist for names with arbitrary punctuation or imaginative pronunciation. How do I tell him that written on his forehead and on their tongues is failure, is threat, is clenched purse and crossed sidewalks, is prison numbers tabulated from test scores? How do I explain that he has 4 brothers and statistics fold sheets on prison beds waiting for 2 of them? How do I tell him that he should never be ashamed of his name, but that teachers will always find it hard to say, but expertly quote the last name of his classmates with Polish ancestors? Those names sound like right. Daquan sound like nigger, like frisked and searched, like clenched fist and stand your ground. Daquan sound like Medgar, like Emmett, especially when it's said with a little bull Connor in it. Daquan sounds eerily close to Tamir, exactly like ignorance like sphere. Daquan sounds hashtag ready. Daquan is 11. Voice hasn't changed yet. 7 years from being able to vote, 7 seconds from being a threat. Soon, Daquan will realize his blackness. Someone will purpose to make him feel less than. Someone will treat him as more than Daquan. They will treat him like his name is danger, like his name is destruction, like his name is remedial rape, robbery, robbing the innocence before I can tell him that Daquan, even when said softly, could sound obituary. Daquan is 11. Daquan is a good boy. He straight A's and pleases and thank yous. Daquan and I will have that talk in front of the mirror. I wonder if we will cry. So that's that poem there. Definitely, the question was asked earlier about having certain conversations, and it was mentioned about having that talk, and Lucy mentioned about having a talk with her son, and that's real. And I think about what the talk I've had to have, and I was a teacher. I taught for 10 years, actually 3 years in middle school and 7 in high school, and I had to have those same talks with my students. So it's important, and it's unfortunate that that's the reality. And I think the fact that a lot of people don't understand that to be the reality, and the first poem, the allusions to what Black people and Black men, is Black people carry with them on a daily basis, like carrying that weight on a daily basis, and just not being able to just live your life in a normal manner. And we see it all the time, right? Like we see people calling the cops for Black people just living, and knowing that as a Black person in America, that if someone calls the cops on me for just living, that could be the end of me, right? That could be it, you know. So having that weight as an individual, and then think about that collectively, and then thinking about having to impart that information on a child, having to have that actual conversation. And I have nieces. My poems in my book that are to my nieces as well. That's about them being Black women. You know, a lot of the things that, you know, Lala alluded to, just being Black women, and what does that feel like, and that extra weight of that. And so I'm going to do a last poem. A lot of my poems, the title of my book is "And the Walls Came Tumbling," and a lot of my poems are, you know, deal specifically with reality, and reality is I'm a Black man. But this is a poem I wrote. This is a like brand new poem, and I wrote this right a little bit after, when I was able to write something post George Floyd. I never watched the video, but I know what happened, and this is after that. I'm so damn tired of writing poems like these. I'm good at it though. At writing poems like these, at penning pain, making paint out of bloodstains. Charcoal remains become legacy on canvas. Paper, pen collide like Black body and bullet, like Black body and concrete, like Black bodies in white imaginations, like Black-bodied boys being berated, batons beating, bullets burning, backs, bowels, blood boiling. That's mine. My blood boils because I'm writing a poem like this, and I hate it. Though I'm good at it, like the drop step I learned from watching Akeem the Dream, I got a lot of practice dreaming. You get good when you have a lot of practice dreaming. Repetition must be the father of invention. I've been writing poems like these in my dreams. You would think the resolution would be different, but it always remains grainy, bleak. The protagonist never prevails, not even in the sequel. Ain't no excess machina saving nobody, no Black bodies being lifted except on 6 broken shoulders on the Black back of some other Black bodies because they done took another one. Somebody's son, a little girl, a body that don't claim neither but can't help but claim Black, has been returned to the galaxy, become legacy on a shirt, wall, following pound sign or number sign, whatever you call it. Names become trending. These Black names, we always set trends. Keep moving the culture list. The vultures just feast on carcass, carry on, but we just keep carrying on. We done upgraded though. Ain't just fruit no more. We familiar. They no more herbivore. They need pounds of flesh and numbers. We repeating hashtags now. Seem to be waiting on the next Trayvon, but literally the next Black body birth certificate branded with Trayvon to be trending because they done took another one. They want it, and they get it in Black bodies, in Black tears, in Black moments spent on unnecessary worry, moments spent on poems like these, odes and sonnets, haikus slipped in obituary inserts, church pew psalms then turned into dirges now, into Tupac verses now, into poems like these where we see no changes. Oh, you thought this had some hopeful resolution. Revolution ain't made of hope. It's made of Holy Ghost anger. I'm gonna do a lot of rage mixed with Ghetto Girl's box cutter. Smiley, Stutter, and his flame do the right thing. There's some brothers on the wall now. Does that mean it don't get burned to a crisp? Or is that the reason that the match gets lit? The reason doors get kicked in, this poem gets written for the brothers on the wall, those sisters on the wall, all of those that had to fall before the rubble or rumble made any sense. Doesn't make any sense to keep writing poems like these. I don't know. I hope one day I won't have to. Thank you all so much.
Thank you everyone who spoke on the panel, and thank you all who have joined us in this conversation. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of push and drive for you guys to share your stories. And I know you guys keep giving me praises for inviting you here, but it's purposeful. Your voices do need to be heard. So I'm just, following the instructions that I'm given. So I do appreciate you all for listening to me or being obedient to a higher being, God, Jesus. So I thank you. Right now, we're going to go ahead into the question and answers. But again, y'all, if y'all could show some, because I was tearing up a bit over here and I'm like, oh Lord, I'm trying to read what I'm about to say. But that was amazing. So please, if you can hit those emojis with hand claps or just any shout outs to all of the panelists for their good jobs. You can come on now and just give them a round of applause because they really shared their hearts. So thank you all. Without further ado, there were a few things that I saw and I wanted to, because I was monitoring the the chats, and I do want you guys to continue to, thank you. Thank you for coming on, guys, and expressing your love for the panelists. But I did want to come back to some of the things that were shared. Nichelle, you said, I've never considered a private school as a safe place to work. If you do not mind unmuting your mic and expounding on that, what do you think is needed, knowing that Jan is the director and is looking to reach out into the varying communities to support our kids? What is it that gives you pause or not consider it as a safe place? And what work would she or any of her colleagues or people in those positions need to put forward in order for that to be considered a safe place for you, Nichelle?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. I would say it's the demographic of the staff, yes, but I would say also the students. And what I mean by that is those students have parents, and those parents have influence. Those parents have voices. So it unnerves me a little bit, the idea of going into a population where not only am I the minority, but the stakeholders would also not reflect me as well. We know even in public schools, when you go to highly affluent areas, that the parents kind of run the buildings, right? So I fear that if I were in a private school setting, it could potentially be even more. And I'm saying all of this knowing that I don't have a lot of education of what it may be like to be in a private school setting. Years ago, when I was a classroom teacher, I did interview at a private school. I was in a situation where I just wanted to get my foot in the door in a particular neighborhood. And I remember it was just very stuffy in the interview. It was very different. I was the only person of color in the room. The questions that I was asked kind of had this tint of assumptions about my own education, my own background. And again, that could have just been that school, but it's put a bad taste in my mouth. And then again, looking at different schools in my own city and knowing that the demographic, like I said, doesn't reflect me, I've kind of been turned off and just said, nope, I'll stick to my Title I.
Thank you, Nichelle. Do you want to address anything, Carlos? I know you're at a private school, and Jen, you're at a private school. If you wanted to address what Nichelle said. Thank you so much, Nichelle, for sharing.
So it's interesting. I wrote down a couple things that you had said about the stakeholders and who kind of runs a school. I would say some schools are at that place where the parents do run the school. I would say our principal does not allow that whatsoever. That is kiboshed right away. But I would say our sister school in the area, which is, I would say, more elite, more of the, I would say, the higher socioeconomic families go to the sister school, and that one, the families do. I mean, they have a lot of pull at that school. And so I think it depends school by school. So that's kind of what I would say in regards to that.
Yeah, I echo what Jennifer says. I mean, it also depends on the school, on the makeup of the school, on the leadership of the school. I've been, so far in two different Catholic high schools, and it's been two very different experiences as far as leadership. Where I'm at now, luckily my principal was a former, school counselor. Well, I don't think you're ever a former school counselor. I think you're always a school counselor.
Right.
He was a former school counselor, so he understands, and he lives by the premise of advocating for the students, and number one. So his support is amazing, and sometimes it's not popular among parents, but like Jennifer's principal, he doesn't care. He's gonna do what's right for the students, and that's it. That's the bottom line. So and not every school, unfortunately, like that. And we have, I feel, not only in our student body, but also in the faculty, we do have a little bit more diverse, population than maybe some of the other schools. But again, it depends on the school, and then don't let the one experience with that school kind of turn you off to that. Give another school a chance. There are different leaderships, make the difference in the schools.
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you, Jennifer. I have a direct question here for you, Lala, from Christiana. Hope I said that right. Cobb Dozier. Christiana, could you come on and ask that question to her?
Yeah, I can. And thank you for getting my name right. It is Christiana. And so, yeah, Lala, you were sharing and you made mention that you were in your school just wondering like, okay, if change needs to be done, somebody's got to do it. And you took it upon yourself, which is really brave, I think, as a student. But as a school counselor, I think in my mind, it goes to like, but you shouldn't have to do that, right? We're there. We should be making those changes. But I guess when you did try to make changes for more equity in your school, how could your counselors or other staff, how could they have better supported you so that it didn't feel like, so that the results felt more tangible or that you were protected?
Thank you, Christiana. I felt like just seeing how involved they might have been with other events that went on in school, I felt like they could have did more with participation. I know like my school had this awesome thing that was called like Spirit Night, I believe that was the title of it. But it was basically to bring our school together and the participation and make sure we had good school spirit. We had so many things for that, and I loved that event. It was awesome. But just to know that they could do that, my school was capable of putting on such a grand event and move something that they thought was a problem. School spirit was a problem. So we did all of this to improve school spirit. I felt like we knew there was a problem in our diversity and inclusion within our school. So there could have been more participation with what I was trying to pull off and what many other students were trying to pull off as well. Also, I felt like there could have been just more speaking up too, because I felt like there was a lot of silence. And when there's silence, when someone's not talking to you, you don't really know how that other person feels. So like, you don't really know if, okay, is this working or are people going along with it? I did get some, like I said, in like what I was my little speech earlier, I did get some praises and like, oh, that's great. I love what you're doing. But a lot of it was just silence. So I really didn't know what direction to go. It was kind of just like, okay, I'm just kind of going along with it. So I would say my two things were participation and speaking up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lala and Christiana. I want to pose a question to any school counselor, but first our three that are on the panel. how would you support a student like Lala? Just giving some resources or giving your approach so that we can help one another in assuring that our students of color are supported in the things that they advocate for. And as former educators as well. So Darius, you are open to share as well.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start. One of the ways that I would help Lala is just seeing that if she came to me and expressing that she felt this way, I would do whatever I can to help her, to guide her in that direction and try to help her to get support from other staff members at the school.
I think the big thing too is knowing that there needs to be support and not knowing of what the vision is, and not knowing if that support was needed. And so a lot of communication is a big thing, and to be able to see what the mission is, what the views are, and then being able to support, because we don't know what we don't know. You know, and so if we don't know what's trying to be done, we can't help and support in that manner. And I also think it would be, you know, of coming to school counseling, that we're also an advocate for it going to the administration, you know, and advocating for our students with the administration. And so if there was a need there, that would be something that I think that we should be involved with also.
Yeah, absolutely. Finding out what their needs are, what it is that they're seeking. Luckily, in our school, we do have an excellent alumni base that is very diverse. And in fact, we've had during Black History Month, we do have, African American graduates, alumni come in and speak to not just African American students, but to speak to every student, and being that support system for them. And finding other resources in the school and outside in the community to help them, and again, being the advocate for them in every way that we can. Definitely, I think the most important role that we have, and showing that no matter what, we're going to support them, and we're there for them.
If I could add something, I think the idea of as an educator, working with young people, being an advocate, but I also think it's super important that we're willing to take the arrows for them, and not just say, "Well, I advocate, I got you what you need," right? We have to be willing to take arrows and be the ones to get in trouble or whatever, or to get the dirty looks from your colleagues or whatever, right? Like put it on you. Like we're the adults here, so really stand in the gap for them and be the ones to take the arrow for them.
I like that, taking the arrow.
There, Darius. Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Not just talking the talk, but walking the walk.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Anyone else in the audience want to share their approach?
I was just going to say, I agree with Darius being the one to take the arrows. I know in speaking with you ladies, Lucy and Fran, I talked about maybe that I don't think I do that enough for my students. And, I definitely have to be that person, be willing to be that person for them, because, and I'm with elementary, so they can't even really advocate for themselves. So, just making sure that I'm stepping in every time and not just some of the time.
As a non-counselor, I would like to say I like what you all are saying about being there for them, but it goes back to knowing that you need to be there to be the advocate, understanding diversity, and being able to share with a broader population of counselors to know.
Okay, thank you for sharing iPhone Sonia. Anyone else want to share there before we go on to the next question that I have? I'm also reading the chats. Okay, Gloria Fleming. Sometimes students and adults are watched but not seen. We need to help people really listen and really see us. Do you want to expound, Gloria, on how we can be seen and heard, and that people see us and not see something that is a disillusion of us?
Hi,
Are you?
Hi,
There
everyone.
you are. Hi.
Checking with the buttons. I just think sometimes, and I think of the George Floyd incident of well, murder, of how it caught everyone's attention. Now there have been murders going on for a long time. I think his name, the young man was Eric Gardner in New York, who was saying he couldn't breathe as the policeman was on his head. This time, I think more people actually listened, they heard what was going on. For me, I'm always upset when I see the murder, but it's kind of, okay, they shot him, it's at a distance and it's gone. This time it was 8 minutes that people were able to watch this poor man begging. But for me, when he said, "Mama," I stopped in my tracks. It gave me chills, and every time I hear that and say that, it's like he was calling me. That I wanted to be there and tell that officer, you've got to get off of him. So it was more people saw it and heard it this time. And I think sometimes that's what we need to do. And I felt that when I worked in a school system, sometimes I had to write things down. And I would say, I've been saying this all along. And they were like, "Oh, we didn't realize that's what you were saying." So sometimes you have to put it in black and white. Sometimes you have to demonstrate. You have to put it in a PowerPoint with background information for them to just keep going until they see and they hear it. Because a lot of times I really don't think they do. It's like, when people say to me, "Oh, I don't see you as Black." Well, they don't see that as offensive, that they're saying to me, "I don't see you, I don't recognize you as a Black person." No, recognize me as a Black person. And I'll tell you, I'm better equipped to speak out now just from courses I took in Black history and civil rights, at Notre Dame. And it's, in the program that I was in, I wanted to take a pilgrimage south with a class. And the administrator said, "Well, no." And I said, "Oh, why not?" He said, "Well, you'll miss part of one of the great books classes." I was like, "Well, I've spoken to the professor. We have a plan, And so finally, the lady said, "Well, didn't you hear, our director, I won't name him, say no?" And the other lady and the other lady who is white, she's a journalist, she wanted to go on to the South too on the pilgrimage. And we both said, "Well, if we listened to no all of our lives, we wouldn't be here at Notre Dame." So yeah, we heard him, but we came back with a plan. So now what is your reason? If I'm missing an hour of great books, I've spoken to the professor. I have work planned after class to meet with them. And we're going to do a PowerPoint presentation when we come back from the South to present to the great books class. So that's just an example of sometimes they have an agenda and they don't want to veer from that agenda until you hit them over the head with, "I'm not taking no for an answer." So that's kind of you know, one thing that recently happened to me about people just not listening. And it's like, well, we gave you that plan before. So this time, hear us, please, because we're going on that trip south. And you know, that was it. So this was a wonderful conference. Since I'm on, I'm so proud of everyone here. I'm so proud of the leadership in this group, and please keep me on your email list, and I would love to support you and come back for more conferences. Thank you so much. I know Lala. I mentor her at Notre Dame, and she's a treasure.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yes.
And just knowing her for these last, I think, 2 weeks, I think
Yes.
she's an amazing girl and she has a bright future. Thank you so much, Miss Gloria.
Thank you.
Okay, someone was saying, "Hey, Miss Gloria." I thought that was a question. So I'll ask one more question. And again, it's open to anyone who would like to respond. We are at our time at 8, so I'll ask this question, and I will then, once we finish that question, if there are no more questions in the chat, we'll go ahead and get to our closing and our raffle winner. So my last question, and I'm not sure how many people know this, but the young lady, that it was a young lady, a teenage girl who actually recorded or filmed George Floyd's murder. If she were your student, how would you support her in this time, knowing that she witnessed murder? She hid her identity for a while out of fear, I believe. How would you mentor her, support her, counsel her, and stand with her going forward? Because she did a courageous thing. By sharing it, we would not know what happened to this young man if she were not there. And I thank God that they didn't do anything to her. And I pray that nothing does happen to her. And I hate that I have to add that last part. So anyone who would like to share how you would support this young lady.
I would say even the trauma in itself. I mean, she could really have PTSD in regards to this. And I think that's, you know, what we could do short term, but I mean, we also have to look at long term for her. You know, it's not going to be enough for us at the school to counsel her. She would really need more than that. But coming out, I mean, if it came out that it was her, and everybody at the school knows, and all of this, I would also have to work with her specifically on how to be proactive and do some role playing and such when people talk to her about these things and certain things that could come up, anything to do to support her. But I think, you know, there are going to be those people in the schools that, you know, would say something to her. And I think that if it is okay with the parents and whatnot, to be able to help her to be prepared for that. But also, there's so many levels of trauma that she's going to undergo.
Thank you, Jen. Does anyone else, and this is not limited to the panel, it's also to anyone here attending in the audience who would share. I know we do have some people that are on here who are not school counselors. We have social workers, we have students, we have counselors of psychology, we have therapists of mental health in adults and children that do not practice in the school. So you guys are welcome to share.
I think as a school counselor, I mean, the first thing we gotta address for her is, you know, like Jennifer just said, I mean, she witnessed a murder. She witnessed a murder, and that's, you know, that the first thing she needs is to have that support, to have that counseling, to have somebody to help her with that aspect of it. And, and then, she's going to be obviously somebody who everybody's going to know at school, and just monitoring her constantly, keeping in contact with her family, and, and giving that support to her any way possible, on a consistent basis, throughout her career, not only in high school, but, obviously as she's going to need resources when she gets to college as well. It's going to be hard for her to kind of stay under the radar right now, at least for a while. So just monitoring, her mental health, and, and showing that she does have support. I mean, she's a hero. She's brave. She's extremely brave.
Thank you, Carlos. Ms. Gloria shared, stand by her, speak up for her. I feel that she should consider counseling. She shouldn't have to speak unless or until she's ready, if ever. And I do agree. John V.F. Stevenson says, provide and be her safe place to come to when needed. And when you experience, think about someone in the military who sees that. They go through years. If they don't go through years of counseling, we know what the outcomes could be for them. So this is the same. PTSD is something that not only does she have to deal with front on, even the children that we counsel who saw that, because I know that some of my elementary kids saw it. Mm-hmm. And that's a tough conversation that I'm going to have. I've had parents reach out to me regarding it, and how they should speak to their children about it, and standing by, showing them that, because they felt the need for them to see it. And I can relate, because I can recall seeing Emmett Till as a little girl, seeing him in the casket, and not that I'm not that old, but watching films. My mom made sure that we were exposed to a lot of culture, and she did not raise us to be racist, but you can't help but feel when it's done to you. And even as a African American woman or a Black woman, I know that there are things that I need to work on. I agree with Lucy. I've had those courageous conversations outside of my culture, but I can't say that I'm always comfortable having those conversations with individuals outside of my culture. So I think that we all have a level of PTSD that we need to address when we've seen things like that, or gone through traumas, period. But it's specific when you have been exposed to someone's life being taken from them, or even being put down because of the color of your skin or the content of your character. What were you gonna say, Anisha? I see you came on, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I got a private message from Sonia. I think she probably meant to put it in the chat. Can you hear me? I'm getting the internet message again. I got a private message from Sonia. I think she probably meant to put it in the chat. It says the schools, at least in her area, South Bend, Indiana, would not provide support, but they would punish the student. Recording with your cell phone, fights, or anything else is punishable. But maybe if that was an incident that happened in the school, I'm thinking she's talking about. But yeah, I mean, even, and I probably in most high schools, that's a referable offense, probably.
But do you think that's something that needs to be changed given the circumstances?
I think depending on the situation, they can make exceptions, because a lot of students like to record to post, not necessarily for any sort of change, but just for entertainment, which I can understand that aspect of it being troublesome. But if it's something that is used to help a situation, I think that's they may have to make exceptions for that, but I'm in elementary. Phones in the backpack.
We struggle with the phones at elementary level too, guys. But as far as, I've had to counsel about recording fights. So they do take them out on their walks home and misappropriate their usage. I received a private message too. Can someone help us to understand the language that the majority speak? Can you clarify that for me, Ms. Petty?
I'm sorry, I'm not a missus, but I am.
Oh, it says Carla.
Yeah,
Sorry, sir.
I'm under my wife's name right now.
Okay. What is your name? I'm sorry.
Carlos.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. I done made a connection. Hi, Dad. You have an awesome daughter.
Thank you. Thank you. So we speak about these things, and we speak to the majority about these things, but it's almost like we're muted or they're turned off by how much we speak. So what language, can somebody help us to understand what language they will hear?
That is a good way of putting that. Yes, Lala, I figured out it was your dad. Thank you so much, Carlos. You stumped me there. Yeah, what language do we use to be heard? Because even in our mask activity, one of the things that what came up was we're not being heard or seen or regarded. Even some say that they didn't feel, that's from our previous conversation for those who are joining us for the first time. We did have a little activity and it's still on our Instagram and Facebook page where we told you to flip the mask and put what you're feeling on the inside on that mask. And it's something that you can utilize with kids in these courageous conversations. If you want more information about that, we can definitely share that information. Again, it's on our Brown Girls Who Counsel Instagram, but it's literally writing how you feel on the inside and you aren't able to verbalize that, putting it on the mask. So since we have to wear these masks, you see how I feel, and putting the things that you portray or want to feel, the positive things on the inside, keeping it close to you and exposing your feelings. But I don't know, Carlos. That's a good question. How do we get heard? It's moving kind of fast. Jen, what made you realize all these racial inequalities? What language or what action happened? Is the question posed for you, Jen. And if you guys have to leave, we understand. We didn't want to go over, but I don't want to. We'll go another maybe 5 to 10 minutes.
So in regards to the racial inequalities, are we talking about in my past or in school? I don't know what that's referring to.
The question came from Lorraine Davidson.
Yeah, so excuse me, it's been my voice, it's a little hoarse right now. But I'm wondering, as a white woman, what made you, how did you realize these racial inequalities when it came to Black people in the past, present, and like everything that's going on, whether it be in the schools? Well, it's not just in schools, it's society.
And life, right.
When it comes to Black people, like what did it for you?
This is just me personally, and I would say I'm very much an empath, and I very much, though I can't imagine what people go through, my mind goes right to that of what if that was me? What if that was when I see things happening to people? And I think, I feel very naive growing up, and I'll say that just because a lot of the things that I indicated was reflecting back as an adult on some of these instances. I don't think initially I saw it. I think it's looking back as an adult. And that was something that Fran and I and Lucy had talked about when we were talking. It was very interesting that though I felt that I was probably brought up with a mother that was racist, how did I not become that way? You know, and I don't know. I don't know. I think that I was very blessed in being able to have interactions with all kinds of people through college, through, you know, people from from cultures and races and everything, from socioeconomic differences. And I think that, I don't know, I think I'm just that person that really kind of is a thinker and kind of tries to put myself in how people would feel if they were treated certain ways. I really couldn't pinpoint it. I can't pinpoint it. I apologize.
Again, just sharing that, you know, we won't have the answers, but we are searching for them. So I hope that helps some. Lorraine, do you have any further questions? It says something about both. I'm sorry. Let me go back up because I think I missed part of your question because it jumped.
Okay. Can I say something? I want to say
Yes,
something.
there is.
Going back to Carlos's question about language and what do you say, I think, you know, like anything else, in any kind of relationship, it's about honesty. It's about authenticity and being unafraid to be authentic and at the same time, and being vulnerable in that space. Because, you know, chances are you may not be heard. It may not be received in the way that you want it to be received. But I think it's important to continually express yourself in an authentic way, in an authentic manner. No need to try to sugarcoat things, to think about, oh, well, is this going to, you know, is this person going to be offended, or are their feelings going to be hurt, or whatever, right? You can't really be so concerned with making sure that everybody, it feels palatable for them. So you gotta give it to them raw. And if they're reasonable people, because some people aren't reasonable, and you're not gonna reach them. And no matter how sweetly or succinctly or poetic you say it, you're not gonna reach them. So I think those aren't the ones that you concern yourself with. I think you concern yourself with those who may be reasonable, and then potentially, if you connect with that reasonable person through your authenticity and your truth and your honesty, and then maybe that person can, you know, talk to their unreasonable uncle and get something out of them. But it's not on you to do that. Just keep living your life gloriously and honestly, and keep shining. And, you know, if they get it, they get it. If they don't, they don't. You know, our hope is that they will. Right.
Could I
Thank
add
you.
on to what Darius was sharing? I won't.
Sure, go ahead.
I just wanted to add on to that. Like, yeah, we may not always have all the right language, and there is no right language necessarily, but I think the authenticity is really important. And also something I've been doing is challenging those who are in my circle as allies to be more than allies, to be accomplices, and to speak up in areas, or to the folks who won't necessarily hear me, right? Of course, I'm going to say Black Lives Matter. I'm Black and I believe my life matters, but for a white person to tell another white person, no, you need to listen to them, sometimes it hits a little different. So if there are people in your circle who say they love you and they care about you, but they're kind of sitting back, my challenge would be to go to them first and say, this is how I need you to step up in this fight. If